So, My Hero Academia Manga Chapter 336 has been released, and let's just say that from what we learned in this chapter, we need to stop jumping to conclusions because we will get it wrong every time. Come on, guys! And we'll talk more about that right after this. Hey guys, how's it going? It is your boy, Manga Man Drew, and I'm here to do my manga review for My Hero Academia Manga Chapter 336, titled Villain. Ooh, ominous. We're actually going to really confront a villain in this chapter, and it's going to surprise you, or it's not going to surprise you, depending on who you think it is, because in this chapter, we do get the reveal of who the UA Traitor is. And from what we saw with last chapter, the obvious choice is that Hagakure is the traitor, because of course she is. It's not like Hirokoshi has done something with red herrings in the past and that we may have just jumped to a conclusion because of it. No, we would never do that as a fan base. But overall, when it comes to this chapter, before we get into the actual review, I think that there was just a large focus on the UA Traitor. Of course it is, based off what we saw last chapter. It would be surprising if we didn't focus on the UA Traitor, as well as we get a little bit more context and actually see something from the class that many people may have thought that we weren't going to see. And so, before we jump right into the review, I'd like to ask you, if you haven't done so, to subscribe to my YouTube channel. We are literally a few subscribers away from 1,000 subscribers. That is a huge milestone for me. So I would love for you to subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't, so that we can reach that 1,000 subscriber goal. And without the way, let's get right into the review. And we're actually going to start the review off by actually covering the top 10 popularity poll rankings. Yes, we finally get the rankings for the top 10 My Hero Academia characters currently, and this list is probably going to either completely shock you or not shock you at all, because we do see Aizawa's on the list, of course, Hawks, Shoto, obviously, Ida, Kirishima, Present Mike, and Shinzo. That is actually something that I really didn't expect, but seeing what we've seen of them in the story, it makes sense. But probably the most shocking on this list is probably Rody. And in actuality, it's not that shocking because Rody was extremely popular in the My Hero Academia fandom, at least in Japan when it comes to when the movies were released, so it makes sense that he would be on this list. Alongside, obviously, Bakugo as well as Deku, and you could probably guess who got first place. Yes, Bakugo actually got first place. Yeah, it's not shocking, but hey, what do you expect from fangirls? But this time, diving into the chapter proper, talking about Bakugo, we actually start this chapter off with seeing the UA students train. Shocking. Many people may have assumed that just because they got the dialogue that, oh, we've been training the entire time, that we won't actually see the students training, when in actuality, we are. We actually do get an explanation of what they are doing in the scene, as we get an explanation of Bakugo's new cluster, where he pretty much explains it that he's just shooting out beads of sweat and is able to control it based on what he learned in his Endeavor Agency arc, and that now he's able to create bigger and more rapid explosions in succession that he calls cluster, and that he's now able to do this probably more frequently, and that the reasoning why he's wearing his winter costume is that it allows him to sweat a little bit more, but unfortunately it's at the detriment of him getting tired quicker. So yeah, it's very interesting to see that we are getting an explanation for how a cluster works, and that from what we see with what Bakugo says, cluster is just making his original explosions just stronger. So now instead of it just being like explosion like I thought of in the last chapter, or like howitzer, it's probably going to be a combination of his older moves with the addition of cluster to it. But if we actually look slightly in the background, we get to see other characters that seem to be training as well. I believe you can also see Shoji in the small image right behind Bakugo, and right beside Bakugo, you get to see Kirishima as well as Ozuro and Sato beating the heck out of Kirishima, so that's cool to see. And we're also getting some hints to how Shoto is going to be training, because he brings up this idea that he has brought up his fire side to be just as comparable to his ice side, and that now what he's going to do so that he can face off against Dabi is to turn them into one, make his left and right halves into one, which is interesting because a thought that I had, and I'm not sure if I stated it before, but what would be a cool power buff for Shoto if he's able to use fire and ice from both of his sides, where if he's firing against Dabi, he's able to attack Dabi with his ice side. Dabi is able to use fire to burn it down, and then he attacks with his left side, but instead of it being fire, it's also ice, and it takes Dabi and his opponents off guard. Because even though his quirk name is half hot, half cold, that doesn't necessarily mean that he can only or should be only to use half hot on one side and half cold on the other. His resistances may be side dependent, but it doesn't make sense for him to not be able to do it because it is still one quirk. And as we also got a little bit of that from Shoto, we just had Mineta and as well as Kaminari just talking, shooting the stuff, saying, yeah, wow, you know, it's weird that the two aces of the villains have been significantly weakened, as well as Gigantomachia is still sedated in a specific complex that we get to see in this chapter, as well as we got to see the chapter title 336 titled Villain. And from here on out, for a few pages, we just have Kaminari and Mineta being put in their place, specifically by both Bakugo and Momo, starting off with Bakugo saying that, yeah, no, you're off by like 3 specific points, and we list what the points they are off about when it comes to facing against All For One and the villains, and the 3 points are pretty much that they don't know where All For One is and that he's very good at hiding. The second is that Shigaraki was incomplete during the fight at the hospital, and that they have a 50-50 chance of actually defeating him because of how many heroes they've lost. And 3, the villains are going to be the ones to make the first strike, so no matter really what they do, they still have to prepare because they won't be able to take action first. So yeah, it's very interesting, and these points do make sense. All For One was able to hide from All Might. All Might didn't think that he survived, but he did, and he was able to hide from the law for 5 years. So it makes sense that he'll be able to hide now. Yeah, Shigaraki was really out of it during that fight, and that they almost won during that fight, but it's going to be a lot harder because they have a lot less resources when it comes to heroes, as well as Shigaraki is most likely stronger, so that is also a thing that makes sense. And finally, they do bring up the fact that the villains are going to make the first strike, which makes sense because, as we saw in the war, the heroes make the first strike and were able to get the jump on the villains, but that was because the villains were unprepared. Now that the villains are prepared, they're going to be the ones to most likely take the first strike, and they even bring up the idea that even if Search is destroyed, which could imply that it is, that they're still going to be the ones to make the first move, so that just makes a lot of sense within the context of the story. And even with that context, you even have like Deku thinking that, yeah, that may be true, but I still want to go out there and do some recon just in case that we can find them, as he just karate chops him in the head, saying that, no, we are going to do it. As we also get the return of Afro Deku. Yes, Afro Deku, the best Deku out there. Better than Dark Deku, better than original Deku, better than new Deku. It's all about the afro. Yeah, also they bring up the idea that they're able to move a little bit more freely because of Uraraka's speech, and we do get to see this small little scene of Uraraka just turning away, is very still embarrassed at what she did. Most likely she's still trying to hide her affections from Deku because it just makes sense for her to do it. It's in her character. She's been trying to like hide her feelings for so long. They kind of like came out in her speech indirectly, but she's still trying to hide it because she still doesn't want to put that burden on him, most likely because that's just a part of her character. She doesn't want her crush to define who she is, but she also doesn't want it to interfere with Deku doing what he needs to do, so that just makes sense. And then we just end this conversation and this part of the chapter with Kaminari chiming about how All For One is just laughing at them right now, even though he's pushed into a corner, which, I mean, how is he going to be laughing at you? It's not like he has, like, I don't know, an informant in your midst that's able to relay the information about what you're doing and what you could do back to him so that he can prepare accordingly. I mean, it's not like there's like a traitor among the class students. I mean, come on, Kaminari, you have to be better than that. So we jump over to what the traitor is doing right now and how they're actually being monitored by Hagakure. Shocker! So yes, we do get more into the traitor part of this chapter, where we do have Hagakure from last chapter. What we saw last chapter was just hinting at the fact that Hagakure is following the traitor. We get a little bit of exposition or explanation of what has been going on, how a lot of the students at first were not jovial at first, and that this one person also wasn't, but that the difference is that when Deku came back, everyone else got a little bit happier, a little bit more cheerier, as if things were returning back to normal, except for this one person. And as we don't know who this person is yet, we do hear what they are talking about. And what we hear they're talking about is basically like someone telling the other person that, hey, yeah, no, All For One is back. He's giving us orders, so you still have to do what you need to do. We're out of the surveillance of the school, so you need to do what All For One has ordered you. Isn't that right? As we get the reveal of who this person is talking to, and it's that they say that you need to continue to do this or we will be killed, Yuga. As we get a double page spread of Aoyama just bawling his eyes out. Okay, so yeah. So this chapter confirms that Hagakure is not the traitor, but it is Aoyama, which it makes just as much sense as Hagakure would. Because here's the thing. Last chapter, we did not get the confirmation that Hagakure was the traitor. It was hinted and alluded at, but it was never specifically stated. This is what I was meaning about how the My Hero Academia fandom was jumping to conclusions. We assumed that, oh, that was the reveal of the UA traitor. Oh, it's bad. Oh, it's horrible. When we really didn't get definitive proof. All we heard was All For One saying that I have friends. And that could mean Hagakure, or it could mean literally anyone else. So yes, Aoyama is revealed to be the traitor, and pretty much there's a lot more reveals coming from his character. We get to see his parents in full view, his mother, his father, as they're telling him that, yeah, we understand, like, you have to continually do this. Like, if you don't, something bad's gonna happen. We're gonna be killed, so you can't ignore his orders. As we have Hagakure hearing this entire situation and thinking about the incident at USJ, as well as the summer camp arc, as she comes to the conclusion that Aoyama-kun is a traitor or is betraying them, as we actually go into a small flashback of Aoyama's history, where he was apparently quirkless and how his parents wanted to give him a quirk to achieve his dreams, and that by doing so they had to go to All For One. And this is very interesting because it puts into perspective more of the red herring that we got about Aoyama being the traitor, which when you think about it, it was less of a red herring and more of a confirmation disguised as a red herring, because he was able to relate to Deku with the idea that they are the same, with their quirks not meant for their bodies, because they were both quirkless. And it's very alluded to at the end of this chapter that when he meant that I know, it wasn't that he knows that Deku's quirk doesn't fit with his body, but that he knows Deku was quirkless. So we just have Aoyama just talking about how it's scary to be different, and how even though his family, his mother and his father wanted to have him achieve his dreams, that if they knew that this would happen and that they would get involved with All For One in this way, that they wouldn't have done it. And while this is all happening, you have Hagakure thinking that she needs to call a teacher, she needs to tell someone, and she sees someone approaching, as we once again get to see the pain that Aoyama is going through. We're really like feeling his guilt, how he feels guilty over everything, how he regrets what he did, and that he thought that he could probably live a more normal life after he was captured, but now he doesn't have that, and all he really wants to do is save his mama and his daddy, and that he doesn't want to let them die. And as he's saying this, and as he's saying that he really wants to save them, you just hear this rustling in the background as Deku, along with Hagakure, discover that Aoyama is the traitor. And his parents tried to like play it off. It's like, oh, no, it's a mistake, you're mishearing thing. As Deku was like, wait, did you just say you were the traitor? Like, Aoyama, is it true? And Aoyama just breaks down, tying it to the end of this chapter, where we once again cut over to Aoyama, a small flashback to him reading the letter, and how he doesn't look surprised at all as he begins thinking about, like, of anyone that were to find out about this, it most likely shouldn't have been Deku, as he just completely breaks down. Deku begins to question, it's like, are you sure about this? Like, why are you so depressed? Like, I realized something was wrong. Like, I came looking for you, as Aoyama just breaks down, saying that the USJ incident, the training camp, I helped them, Midoriya-kun. I am a scumbag villain. As like I said, we cut over to the flashback seeing what he wrote in cheese at Midoriya's window, which is that I know, most likely referring to the fact that he knows that he's the user of One for All and that he was quirkless. So yeah, this was, I will say, a very impactful chapter of My Hero Academia, and I kind of wish that I didn't cover the spoilers for it, but even so, I still think that this is a very impactful and very emotional chapter, not just because of Deku realizing that a friend of his is a traitor, but getting to see how Aoyama was dealing with all of this. Like, we learned that he's the traitor, but we also learned that it wasn't of his own accord. We got to know that he was quirkless, which explains why his quirk has a negative effect on his body, and we also get to see, like, he was acting flamboyantly as he did to hide his true motives, and that was all an act, and that it just kept building and building upon him. And we've seen little hints to that throughout the story, where he's still this like flamboyant figure, but he has these small moments of just like being like serious, which may be the true Aoyama. So if anything, we get to see a man who has pretty much constructed this fictional image of himself to betray his friends, to achieve his goals, all for the sake of not having his family die. He has been living with this guilt the entire time, and now it's finally just crushed him to the point of breaking down, having it revealed to probably the person that he cares about the most in Class 1A, Deku. So yeah, I actually really think that from what we've seen here, this is a very fantastic reveal of Aoyama being the traitor. Not just because a lot of people predicted that he was going to be the traitor, but just how it's portrayed. It's portrayed with a lot of emotion. It's portrayed as being like very weighty. Like, what we're hearing right here is something that we've been anticipating for multiple chapters, multiple years, and now it's finally coming to an end. And next chapter, we're most likely going to get Deku's response to it. And if we know Deku, he's probably going to be like very shaken up about this, as well as with Hagakure, but I think that he's going to begin to accept Aoyama for what he is and not really hold him accountable a whole lot for what he has done. Overall, I really think that this is a very emotional, very impactful reveal, and that's pretty much what this chapter was. We did get some hints of training and them talking about like why they can't really go after All For One now, the problems that they have, and that could lead to them eventually finding solutions for them in the future. But the main purpose of this chapter is to reveal who the UA traitor is, explain why they did that, and to show how this all has affected them and how it's going to affect the other students, most particularly Deku. So yeah, that's all I really have to say about this chapter. I think that this is a very amazing chapter from the follow-up of last chapter, which I still think is okay, but is somewhat lifted up and brought down because of this major reveal, because I thought that this was very good. So let me ask you this. What did you think of the chapter? Did you like Aoyama's reveal? Did you always think that Aoyama was a traitor, or do you still prefer that it be someone else? Leave your thoughts down in the comments down below. I would really love to read them, as well as don't forget to give a like on this video to show that you like this type of content, as well as don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel if you want to see more content like this, and don't forget to hit the notification bell to be notified for whenever I upload more content like this. So yeah, do all that cool jazz, and hopefully I'll be able to catch you in my next video. Goodbye!